Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And we are continuing with our literature unit for the month of July. Welcome again to our program, and we're going to continue talking about our featured work of literature, the novel The Catcher in the Rye, written by J.D. Salinger. And we're going to find out about him in today's lesson, and we're also going to talk about some of the themes and ideas in the book The Catcher in the Rye.
Yeah, as we usually do on day 3, we're going to first talk about the author himself, J.D. Salinger.
And he only had one novel here, among other short stories, I suppose, or other attempts at writing. But yeah, this was the only novel that he's known for. And we'll talk about him, and we'll talk about, again, some of the ideas in the book. So let's get to it. Let's read through the entire contents of our lesson now at one time. The Catcher in the Rye is the masterpiece of J.D. Salinger, an American writer. Salinger was born into an upper-middle-class family, but was more interested in writing and theater than his father's import business. He withdrew from New York University to become an entertainer and also served in World War II. After the war, he enrolled in a writing course and embarked upon his literary career. He went on to have a number of short stories published. The Catcher in the Rye was his only novel and his biggest success. One of the main themes of the story is growing up. As an adolescent, Holden is on the cusp of adulthood. However, he hates what he perceives to be the artificial nature of adults, calling them phony. At the same time, he is tempted by such adult pursuits as smoking, drinking, and sex. This shows his confusion at the changes he's undergoing. One example of this is his continual effort to escape the expectations placed on him as a young adult, either by deliberately failing school despite his obvious intelligence, or by planning to run away. This is also implied in how he's drawn to the innocence of childhood. Holden is at his happiest and most effusive as a narrator during his interactions with Phoebe and the other children he meets, such as the boy singing about a catcher in the rye. This song inspired Holden's dream, which shows exactly how he'd like to protect children from having to grow up.
Okay, guys, let's get started. We're talking about The Catcher in the Rye and author J.D. Salinger. In our open, we were talking about how we didn't know his name. His real full name is Jerome David Salinger, but he wanted to go by J.D. Of course, he's an American. He grew up in New York City. He was born into an upper-middle-class family. So he wasn't poor. He had a bit of money, and he was born way back in 1919. So if you were upper middle class in 1919, you were pretty well off, because even in 1919, there were a lot of poor immigrants who lived in New York City who had very little money and tiny, tiny, tiny places to live. But he was in a pretty good situation. Now, he was more interested in writing and theater than in his father's import business. Yeah, if you import things, you buy goods from other countries and then you sell them in your current country. We know, for example, there are some import grocery stores here in Taiwan. They will buy goods from Japan and India and America because they know they have some customers who are happy to buy those items. I'm one of them. I love to buy things from America. So his father was busy in the import business. And, you know, J.D. just wasn't interested in that. He loved to write. He liked theater. He sounds like an artist. So, you know, there were probably some disagreements and some arguments between J.D. and his father, at least, while he was growing up.
Okay, so here the next sentence says, he withdrew from New York University to become an entertainer and also served in World War II. So if you withdraw from something, you just pull yourself out of it. You no longer attend a university. You can withdraw money from the bank. I withdrew 10,000 NT dollars from the bank yesterday because I wanted to buy a new bicycle, for example. So withdrew is the past tense. Withdraw is the present tense. So basically, he quit NYU in order to become an entertainer. I don't want to read books and stuff like this. I want to go on stage and make people happy. I want to be an entertainer, whether he was an actor or a musician or a comic, a comedian or something like that. And so he became an entertainer. And then he also served in World War II. He was in the military fighting the Germans or the Japanese. Now, after the war, he enrolled in a writing course and embarked upon his literary career. So, yeah, he was in the army, he was a soldier, and then the war ended, and so he went back to the USA and needed something to do, so he decided to study writing. He enrolled in a writing course. If you enroll, that means you basically start studying something. You sign up, you pay the fee, and then you start attending classes.
That's right. I wanted to mention he withdrew from NYU or New York University. That's different from his character Holden, who is actually expelled, or you could say Holden flunked out. Remember, we learned that. If you're expelled, the school itself kicks you out. But he voluntarily withdrew from NYU to become probably an actor. He was interested in the theater. He wanted to be on stage. And as Tom said, he also served in World War II. So after the war, he came home. And he did what he wanted to do. He enrolled in a writing course and then started or embarked upon his literary career. So he went on to have a number of short stories published. He was successful in that. But again, The Catcher in the Rye was his only novel, which is kind of unheard of, really. And his biggest success, we're calling it his masterpiece because, again, it's considered to be a classic of American literature, something that people still pick up and read. But when I was growing up, Tom, I remember hearing about this guy and hearing that he never left his house. So the thing about a Salinger that everybody thought was interesting was that he was a recluse. That's somebody who lives in a remote area, never wants to, leave his house, doesn't like to interact with anybody. You could also call that person a hermit, someone who doesn't want to socialize with anyone else. So it sounds like he probably had some issues with depression himself.
Yeah, a lot of authors are like that. Of course, they get these ideas by spending a lot of time alone. So, indeed, if you're kind of an outsider or something like that, a loner or something, hey, you might want to consider a career as an artist or a writer. But then again, it's very difficult to actually have your stuff published. I think for every novel published, there are probably 1,000 writers who had their manuscripts rejected right away.
You can self-publish these days, though. That's easier. So you can self-publish, and maybe you can get someone to record your book. And if it's good, Audible might put it on their list of books, and Amazon might sell it. So we encourage you not to give up. Go ahead and give it a try. I think it's easier to publish now than it was even 10 years ago.
But as they say, don't quit your day job while you're planning a career as a writer. So, you better support yourself in some way. But in any case, that's what J.D. Salinger did. He returned from the war, enrolled in a writing course, and then embarked upon his literary career. To begin your career, to embark. That usually means a ship starts sailing on the ocean here. And as you said, he went on to have a number of short stories published, and this was his only novel, The Catcher in the Rye. And it was also his biggest success. Now, one of the main themes of the story is growing up. He's only 17, and of course, he's transitioning from adolescence to adulthood. That's what happens when you start attending university, and I think a lot of you can probably relate to this. There are big changes going on in your lives, and it can be a very stressful time of your life. So if you're feeling a lot of pressure, don't worry, that is natural. Everybody's going through that too.
Oh, yeah. Don't think you're alone in that feeling. It's a hard time for everyone. Even if you have a really great family, great parents, you're changing. Your hormones are driving you crazy. You don't know who you are or want to be, and it just is a hard time. Don't give up. Things get better after high school. That's all I want to say here. Now, one of the main themes, as Tom said, is just growing up. And we call it a coming-of-age story. He's an adolescent, meaning he's a teen, and he's on the cusp of adulthood. If you're on the cusp of something, it just means you're just about to enter a different phase in life. Right? So you're at a point where one part of your life is ending and another is beginning. You could be on the cusp of discovery. Maybe you're a scientist and you're really, really close to making a huge discovery. So on the cusp of adulthood, we consider an adult to be the age of 21, but a lot of people say it should be 18, since 18-year-olds are asked to serve in the military.
Right.
So, yeah, that's a discussion for another time. However, it says he hates what he perceives to be the artificial nature of adults. And that's where he gets this idea of calling everybody phony, that they're superficial, they're not who they say they are. He hates this kind of person. Artificial means fake. You can have artificial flavoring in your food. You could have a coat or jacket made out of artificial leather. It's not real leather, it's artificial. We use artificial to describe a lot of things. But here he's just saying, adults always pretend to be something they're not, and he hated that.
Well, he's not wrong. A lot of adults are pretentious. They're always trying to make themselves look like they're smarter or more powerful than they really are. But in this particular case, he hates that idea. I think most of us learn to live with it. Yeah, everybody's pretentious. Everybody's phony. So what?
Insecure.
But he's kind of upset about this. He hates it. He thinks they're artificial, 假的. And, of course, they're phony as well. But I know somebody who's not at all artificial or phony or superficial. That is our Chinese teacher. Let's have a listen.
大家好，我是派老师。今天讲解的是7月份 Unit 11的 Catcher in the Rye Holden Caulfield's Troubled Times 第3天的课文。从课文当中，我们了解到麦田捕手的作者 Salinger 出身富裕的商人家庭，不过他对从商没有兴趣。第二次大战期间Salinger 曾经在军中服役，退伍之后呢，参加了写作课程，从此踏上文学创作之路。好，我们一起来看课文当中的关键句型、文法与重点单词片语。第一段第一句 The Catcher in the Rye is the masterpiece of J.D. Salinger, an American writer. 请同学注意 masterpiece， 那就是怎么样？他的杰作。再来，接着第二句Salinger was born into an upper middle class family. 请同学画起来，就是他出生于中上阶级的家庭 but was more interested in writing and theater than his father's import business. 他父亲所从事的是进口的生意。我们知道说 Salinger 虽然出生在富裕的家庭，不过他比较感兴趣的是写作，还有呢就是戏剧创作。再来第三句 He withdrew from New York University to become an entertainer and also served in World War II. 请同学把 withdrew from 画起来。所以 withdrew from withdrew 就是 withdraw 的过去式， withdraw 是撤退的意思。但这里呢，我们了解到就是他不再去念纽约大学了，他休学。好，接着请看到 serve 所指的在这里呢，指的是 serve in the military， 也就是呢服兵役 military service。 接着请同学看到第四句 After the war, he enrolled in a writing course and embarked upon his literary career. 这里的 enroll in 请画起来，他报名参加写作课程。那他呢接着出版了好几篇的短篇故事。第二段让我们了解到 麦田捕手这本小说要处理的主题是成长。One of the main themes of the story is growing up. 刻画了主角 Holden 在成长阶段面临的内在矛盾，还有外部冲突。第二句，请同学看 Holden is on the cusp of adulthood. Holden 呢，即将成年。这个 cusp 到底是什么意思？其实啊，它是不同阶段、不同状态中间的转折的时间。Those on the cusp of adulthood 就是即将成年的这些人。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. We're talking about The Catcher in the Rye. We talked about the author at the beginning of this Day 3 program. J.D. Salinger was an interesting character. Now, he was born in 1919. He grew up in New York City. He was born into a upper middle class family, meaning they had quite a bit of money, especially back then. He was born in 1919, passed away in 2010. So he really didn't want to go into the import business with his dad. He wanted to write. He wanted to be in theater. You know, he's in New York, so that's what you want to do if you're an artist. You want to be involved. But when he came back from the war, he went ahead and did what his heart told him to do, and that was to enroll in a writing course. And that's when he embarked upon or started or began his literary career. We talked about the themes. One of the main themes of his book is growing up. It's coming of age. It's a coming of age story. He writes as an adolescent. If you're an adolescent, you're a teen. It's a tough time for everyone, guys, regardless of whether you think you have great parents or not. I had great parents, great family. It's still a tough time because your hormones are changing. You don't feel confident. You don't know what you want to do or who you are. It's just a tough time for everybody.
Okay, so again, as you said, this is kind of a coming-of-age story. And Holden, the main character of The Catcher in the Rye, is on the cusp of adulthood. He's about to become an adult. However, he hates what he perceives to be the artificial, superficial nature of adults, and he calls them phony. And at the same time, he is tempted by such adult pursuits as smoking, drinking, and sex. So he hates adults because they're superficial, because they're artificial, but at the same time, he wants to check out things that adults like smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol and having sex. And this shows his confusion at the changes he's undergoing. So confusion is when you just don't know what things are. You're confused. That is the adjective form there. Oh, I'm so confused by what you said. What do you mean? I'm experiencing confusion.
Yeah, a lot of people are confused at that stage of life. So one example of this is his continual effort to escape the expectations placed on him as a young adult. I'm just going to guess here because I didn't read The Catcher in the Rye growing up. It wasn't something that my class, had us read as one of our novels. He probably had some pressure from his parents to enter Dad's business, to continue on with the family business of importing products and then turning around and selling them. It wasn't what he wanted to do. This happens to a lot of people who are drawn to the arts, whether you want to sing or dance or become a great photographer, get into visual arts like painting and drawing. It's just hard for some parents because they worry that you won't be able to make a living. So he had a lot of expectations placed on him as a young adult by his parents. And either by he may have deliberately failed school, despite his obvious intelligence. A lot of kids will do that. I had a brother who would just goof off, and his teachers couldn't stand him because he was always telling jokes. He just got bored in class. When I came along, I'm a year younger, they were like, "Who are you?" I was very obedient, and I got very good grades. So They loved my brother, but he was always getting in trouble because he was bored. Now, if you deliberately do something, you do it intentionally. It's not something that just happens accidentally. You make a plan and you do it. You do it consciously. It's intentional. You do it on purpose. So he failed school even though he was very intelligent, very smart, and could have had very good grades, really.
Yeah, he was smart. He could have had good grades. He could have passed with flying colors. He could have been on the dean's list. He could have got a 4.0 grade point average
Probably.
or whatever. But he failed deliberately. I hate this place. It's superficial. It's artificial. I'm going to get kicked out on purpose.
Yeah.
I'm going to fail deliberately just to make a point, just to waste my parents' money, just to get back at them or whatever.
Oh, I bet his parents were mad.
I bet they were too. And he did this despite his obvious intelligence. So despite here just means even though he had this intelligence, he still failed school. He did this deliberately, and he also planned to run away. Remember, he wanted to go off to Colorado to work on a ranch. Now, here in the final paragraph, it says, this is also implied in how he's drawn to the innocence of childhood. So if something's implied, that means we can understand this even though it's not stated directly.
Right. So innocence of children, the innocence of childhood, it's... Kids don't know there are bad people out there in the world. They don't know about the sadness and the violence that goes on. There are a lot of things that we try to protect kids from. I know when I was growing up, my mom and dad didn't want me watching movies that showed me that sort of thing. They wanted me to enjoy my childhood. If you're innocent, you're pure. You don't know about the bad things in life. And we hope all kids could be protected that way. And it kind of sounds like J.D. Salinger, he really wanted Holden to be protected from that. But unfortunately, no one did protect him. Remember, his moment of pure happiness is watching his little sister Phoebe on the carousel. He was probably hoping he could go back to that time in life. So he's the happiest and most effusive as a narrator during his interactions with Phoebe. So you kind of feel his happiness as he talks about those times he's together with his young sister. If you're effusive, it just means whatever emotion that you feel at the time, it's very obvious to everyone. So he really is expressing his desire to return to that time of life, when he was an innocent child. When you hear him talk about his moments or his interactions with his sister.
Yep, effusive. They're unrestrained. Like I received an effusive welcome when I went to visit my friend Mr. Zhang.
Yeah.
Okay, so in any case here, yes, he's at his most effusive when he's a narrator describing his interactions with his younger sister Phoebe, and also when he meets other younger children. They just have this innocence that he just loves so much. And the other example, of course, is the boy singing about a catcher in the rye, which I believe ultimately comes from a Robert Burns poem, but we don't really have time to get into that right now. And this song inspired Holden's dream, not the dream he had when he was asleep, but his idea of doing something in his life. And that shows exactly how he'd like to protect children from having to grow up. He hopes those children don't have to lose their innocence.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, his own path, his own journey took him to, seedy New York City where bad people were. He tried to drink illegally. He was smoking when he shouldn't have been smoking, and also was trying to interest some girls that turned out to be prostitutes. So, yeah, his heart, though, really wants to be in a place where he's just an innocent child again. Where he's protected from having to grow up, because growing up for Holden was just hard and sad for him. So that's the story, and that's a little bit about our author, J.D. Salinger. We're going to listen to our Chinese teacher one more time, and then we'll be back to say goodbye.
好，我们看到第4句 At the same time, he's tempted by such adult pursuits as smoking, drinking, and sex. 同时呢，也就是他快要成年了， 他受到什么诱惑 ？Tempted by 就是受到诱惑，他想做一些大人会做的事情，抽烟、喝酒等等。第5句 ，This shows his confusion at the changes he's undergoing。请同学呢把 changes is undergoing 画起来。我们可以看得出来，主角 Holden 是有一些困惑的。对什么困惑？对改变困惑。什么样的改变？他正在经历的改变 changes which he is undergoing， 就是他正在经历的这些改变。第6句 One example of this is his continual effort to escape the expectations placed on him as a young adult, either by deliberately failing school despite his obvious intelligence, or by planning to run away. 请同学把 escape the expectations placed on him 画起来。他希望呢能够逃离别人对他的期望。什么样的期望？请把 place on him 画起来，别人加在他身上的期望。The expectations that are placed on him。好，那请特别注意这里的 deliberately， 就是故意的意思。他是故意 failing school。OK， 他故意呢在学校考不好，因为他其实很聪明，但是他是刻意不把这些考试考好，他不好好念书，他是故意的。课文第3段点出主角 Holden 想保有的纯真 Innocence 到底是什么样的状态和感受。This is also implied in how he's drawn to the innocence of childhood. He's drawn to 就是他是如何受到吸引的。He's drawn to 他受到吸引。OK， 接着我们往下看。Holden is at his happiest and most effusive as a narrator during his interactions with Phoebe. 那到底 Holden 什么时候最快乐？就是他和自己的妹妹 Phoebe 互动的时候。在接下来我们看到最后 This song inspired Holden's dream. Holden 呢听到小男孩在哼唱一首歌，而这首歌就是启发了 Holden， 让他想要成为麦田捕手，让他有了这个想法。好的，以上就是我们今天对第3天 Unit 11第3天的讲解，谢谢大家。
That's it for today, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And please join us again next time for another edition of our program. And join us again next month for another edition of our literature unit. I can't wait to find out what we're going to talk about then. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.